Hi, my name is Sarah Morand. My pen name is SG Morand, and in this channel, I am delving into the Harvard Classics collection. I just finished Volume 1 not that long ago, and now I'm going to be talking about Volume 2. And I actually finally was able to come across a hardcover set of the complete Harvard Classics collection. So I am super excited about that. Really excited to get reading these physical copies instead of the ebook as I was reading before. And it's absolutely beautiful. I actually had to get a separate bookshelf for these because it's 5 feet worth of books. So um, definitely was an investment and takes up a lot of space, but I'm very happy with them. Beautiful collection of books. It's got this cool front pages and then illustrations and stuff in the front. And this is volume 2, the Apology, Phaedo, and Crito of Plato, the Golden Sayings of Epictetus, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And I did not read the Apology, which is what I'll be talking about today. I did not read it in this copy because I did not have this yet when I was reading it. So, in the future, I will be reading out of this copy, which I'm very excited about. Just beautiful book, and it's going to be amazing to be able to read it out of the physical collection instead of just the ebook. So, very motivating to continue on with this series now that I have the physical copy. But today I will be talking about the Apology of Plato. So let's get into that. The Apology includes the sayings and teachings of Socrates, who was known for the Socratic method of seeking answers by asking questions. Socrates was also known for talking a lot about his own ignorance, and that if there was one thing he knew, it was that he did not know anything. And I think that's very interesting as a philosopher, that was something he was very aware of, is that there's not, no person can know everything, and it's good to be humble in what you do know. So Socrates was also known for a willingness to learn from others, although sometimes he would listen to others and be proud about him knowing more than them. So it was kind of a double-edged sword in a way, his willingness to learn. He was willing to learn, but he only really saw profit of learning from those who were more knowledgeable than him, and he struggled to find people who he believed were more knowledgeable than him. Socrates was eventually accused of introducing new gods and corrupting the youth. That's what caused him to be imprisoned and eventually to die as a martyr. And this apology was kind of his rebuttal to the courts as he was facing that punishment for his teachings. Throughout the Apology and throughout all of Socrates' works, he talks a lot about a firm holding of conviction and um, being willing to sacrifice for the things and the ideals that you believe in. And Socrates also taught a lot about the importance of having a fearlessness of the consequences that you might face. And he displayed that in his own life by being willing to die for his beliefs instead of caving to the demands of the government of his time. Socrates eventually died as a martyr in BC 399. Socrates himself wrote nothing, and what we do know about him and his teachings comes from his pupils, Xenophon and Plato. And all of the books, well, not books, collections of teachings that are found in Volume 2 of the Harvard Classics, all written by Plato. Plato was born in 428 BC. He was a disciple of Socrates since the age of 20, and one of his prominent pupils was Aristotle. So you can kind of see throughout the philosophers just a lineage of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So it a lot of the teachings, a lot of the philosophical views that are popular today came from that kind of group of teachers and pupils, which I think is very cool. So I got a lot out of reading volume 2 of the Harvard Classics collection. I had never really read real philosophy type stuff before, and I had heard the names of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, but I had never actually explored what their teachings were and what they stood for. So I think starting with Socrates was a really good place to start because he was kind of the beginning of the lineage. And then obviously there's Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius in this volume. And I believe the teachings of Aristotle are further along in one of the other volumes of the Harvard Classics collection. And from the introduction, it appears that the teachings of Socrates in volume 2 also have some of the teachings of Plato kind of interspersed in there, since he was the one to have written it. He kind of may have embellished it a little bit to add some of his own teachings that he taught later down the line. So I think that starting with Socrates, written by Plato, is a great place to begin, because it's kind of just the beginning of the philosophical chain of events. And I found that it was a pretty good spot for a beginner in the area of philosophy to start reading in, because it wasn't too difficult to understand, and a lot of the themes that were taught have kind of permeated popular culture and are well known by people enough that you can kind of understand what he is trying to tell you through his writings. And so, yeah, I found that it was a very good place to start. So now I'm going to read a few of the quotes that I pulled from the book that I very much enjoyed. The Apology is a pretty short book. All of the ones in here are pretty short. I was tempted to throw them all into one video, but I think I might do that with the Credo and Phaedo later on, the other two that are in this volume. But the Apology, I felt, really deserved a video kind of standing out on its own. And it may be a shorter video because of the length of the book, but it was my favorite. Another quote that I enjoyed is, "That showed me in an instant that not by wisdom do poets write poetry, but by a sort of genius and inspiration. They are like diviners or soothsayers who also say many fine things, but do not understand the meaning of them." Socrates was not a writer, as mentioned. He understood that that was something he did not excel at, and he understood that some people did have the gift of writing. And so he was saying that poets write by sort of genius and inspiration. And I think that really stuck out to me because I'm a writer, and I just loved the poetic sense of that sentence. And they are like diviners or soothsayers who say many fine things but do not understand the meaning of them. And that really is the case when you're writing, is you will write something and not really understand what you're trying to convey by those words until they're written. And sometimes they will speak to a person in a way that you never would have even intended for them to be understood. And that's something really interesting about writing that I think Socrates kind of got figured out in this quote. Next quote really I thought was very fitting for the book in general, Socrates' teachings, and something very beneficial for the reader. It says, "He, O men, is the wisest, who like Socrates knows that his wisdom is in truth worth nothing." I really like that quote, that the wisest are those that know that the wisdom they do have is really not worth that much. It's worth some, but it's not worth everything. And that is true wisdom, knowing that you have to have more than just wisdom to succeed. Another quote says, "There you are mistaken. A man who is good for anything ought not to calculate the chance of living or dying. He ought only to consider whether in doing anything he is doing right or wrong, acting the part of a good man or of a bad. And again, Socrates was very into the idea that you should not have a fear of dying and that you should do what is right, whether that leads to your death or not. And he lived that throughout his life, and I think it's something that we should all be aware of, is that we all have to face death someday, and it's better to die for what we believe in than to live a few more years just for the sake of living and sacrifice our ideals and our beliefs in the process. And I think that's something very valuable that can be gained from Socrates' teachings. And something that I need to be reminded of, because I personally have a bit of a fear of death, even though I'm a Christian and I know where I'm going. The process of death is something that I don't like to think about that much. And it's something that I need to work on to not be as afraid of it. And to remember that it's better to focus on doing what is good no matter the cost. Again, he continues this idea with this quote: "For this fear of death is indeed the pretense of wisdom and not real wisdom." He's saying that, people might think that it's wise to fear death and to avoid conflicts that might lead to death, but in fact, it's cowardice and it's not real wisdom, because if you were really wise, you would not fear death, and you would be more afraid of foregoing your ideals. This is a quote that I did not actually realize came from Socrates, that I heard in one of my Bible school classes. From one of the teachers quoted it, and it really stuck out to me then, and it stuck out to me now. And that is, "The life which is unexamined is not worth living." And I think that that is something that is very important for all of us to examine our lives and the type of life we're living and the type of life we want to live, and determine if those two mesh up. Are we living in the way that we want to be remembered for living? Are we doing the things with the time that we have left that are beneficial and good, and not wasting our lives? And if we do not examine our lives in the way that we're living, then we're not living in the way we should be. Something that Socrates said at the end of his trial, when he knew that he was going to be sentenced to die, he said, "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die and you to live. Which is better, God only knows." And that was just very poetic, and it stuck out to me, so I wrote that down as one of the quotes that I liked. So there were all a few quotes there that really stuck out to me. There were more within the book that I decided not to quote in this video. But in all, I really enjoyed the Apology. I enjoyed learning more about Socrates and what his teachings were, and the writing of Plato was very engaging and very real. And so I really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to doing a video about the Credo and Phaedo. And I gave this book 5 stars. Not that a book this important needs a rating, but I felt that it was a very good read, and definitely my favorite of the 3 that I read. And I'll talk about the other 2 in another video. So that is the Apology by Plato. Socrates' Apology, written by Plato. I keep having to remind myself who wrote what. And if you like this video, please like it and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And if you have read the Apology, comment down below what your favorite part of it was, any quotes that stuck out to you, and if not, write what your favorite philosopher that you've read is, if you have read any, or if you're planning on reading any. And stay tuned for the next video about the Phaedo and Credo.